The ISS Harmony was humanity's first major collaborative deep space mission, a joint research vessel where multiple species worked together exploring the uncharted Kepler reach. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a human systems specialist, was known for his easygoing attitude and perhaps excessive use of humor as a coping mechanism. The Velaryn were a species known for exceptional scientific minds, elegant blue-tinted skin that shifted subtle shades based on internal chemistry, and cultural emphasis on dignity and proper conduct. Among the Velaryn contingent was Dr. Lysara, a xenobiology specialist whose work on cross-species cellular compatibility had made her famous in scientific circles. She was brilliant, meticulous, and carried herself with composed grace. She was also, Jake had noticed during 3 months aboard, quite beautiful. Her blue-tinted skin had an almost luminescent quality. Her movements carried elegant grace. The incident happened during a routine shift in the biological laboratory. Jake was performing diagnostics while Lysara analyzed samples at a nearby station. When the lighting system malfunctioned, leaving only blue-spectrum emergency illumination, Lysara's skin took on an even more vibrant quality. Jake, 12 hours into his shift, verbal filter eroded from exhaustion, made an observation without thinking. "You look like a blue Smurf." Perfect silence. Lysara froze at her workstation, completely still. Jake's brain slowly caught up with his mouth, realizing he'd just compared a distinguished alien scientist to a 1980s Earth cartoon character. I didn't mean." Lysara turned around. Jake saw something he'd never witnessed in 3 months working with Velaryn crew. Her skin had shifted to a deeper, richer blue, concentrated particularly across her face and neck. The Velaryn equivalent of blushing. She was flustered. Lysara stared at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she crossed the distance in 3 strides and delivered a slap across his face with surprising force. Jake saw stars literally. When his vision cleared, Lysara stood before him, skin still that deeper shade, chest rising and falling with emotion, expression a complex mix of indignation, embarrassment, and something that might be hidden amusement. That was inappropriate, disrespectful, and completely typical of human verbal impulsiveness. "I am not a Smurf, whatever that is. I am a Velaryn scientist deserving of professional respect." Jake, still processing getting slapped hard enough to see stars by someone who probably weighed 30 pounds less than him, managed to respond. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. That was stupid and disrespectful." He paused, rubbing his stinging cheek. "Though I have to ask, why did you blush first?" The question caught Lysara off guard. Her skin, slowly returning to normal, deepened again. "I did not. Velaryn do not blush. We experience temporary vascular responses to various stimuli. It means nothing." "It means something. I've worked with Velaryn crew for months. I've never seen that color change." Lysara turned back to her workstation. "It indicates surprise, unexpected stimulation of certain neural pathways, nothing more. So I surprised you by calling you Blue Smurf." "You surprised me by..." She stopped, catching herself. "You surprised me by being so casually disrespectful. Now if you would kindly return to your diagnostics, we can complete this shift professionally." "For what it's worth," Jake said quietly, returning to his panel, "Smurfs are considered cute." It was meant affectionately, not as an insult. Lysara didn't respond, but her hand stilled momentarily before resuming with slightly more force than necessary. Over the following days, interactions became noticeably awkward. Lysara maintained professional courtesy but added careful distance. The breakthrough came a week later in the crew's common area. Jake was explaining classic Earth cartoons to curious aliens when the topic turned to Smurfs. "They're these small blue creatures," Jake explained. "Very cheerful, live in mushroom houses. They were huge in 1980s Earth media." He noticed Lysara entering. She spotted him mid-explanation, their eyes met, and he saw that deeper blue flush starting before she turned away. "Hey, Lysara," he called out. "Come here, I'm explaining Smurfs. You should hear this considering. To his surprise, she approached, though her posture radiated defensive dignity. I failed to see why I would need education about primitive Earth entertainment. Because I owe you a proper apology. And because you should understand that being compared to a Smurf isn't actually an insult. They're beloved characters. Millions of Earth children grew up adoring them. He pulled up a reference image. See, small, blue, cheerful. I wasn't calling you small, and the cheerful part might have been aspirational, but the blue part, that's accurate and in the context of Smurfs a compliment. Lysara studied the image. These are considered appealing in human culture. Iconic, beloved across generations. Blue skin is what makes them special, distinctive. So when I called you Blue Smurf, I wasn't mocking your appearance. I was noting that your skin color reminded me of something humans find charming. Something shifted in Lysara's expression. Your species has peculiar aesthetic associations. Absolutely, but we're sincere about what we find beautiful. Lysara was quiet for a long moment. Among Velaryn, direct commentary on physical appearance is considered intimate, reserved for family or close personal relationships. When you casually referenced my skin color, you crossed a cultural boundary I was not prepared for. Understanding crashed down. That's why you blushed, not because you were insulted, but because I was being unintentionally intimate. I did not blush, Lysara insisted, skin definitely deepening. Velaryn experience increased vascular flow in response to unexpected emotional stimuli. It's adorable, Jake said without thinking, then backpedaled. I mean, the way your skin shifts with emotion. It's actually beautiful. Expressive. Lysara stared somewhere between exasperation and reluctant amusement. You truly cannot help yourself. This verbal impulsiveness is simply your natural state. Pretty much. My mother says I was born without an internal monologue filter. I have noticed. Then, surprisingly, she sat down. Explain more about these Smurfs. I wish to understand the full context of your inappropriate comparison. Over following weeks, something shifted. They still worked professionally, but there was an ease now, a playful undercurrent. Jake learned to read Lysara's skin variations. Lysara began responding with Velaryn wit, dry observations delivered with perfect timing. The rest of the crew noticed. The easy rapport, the way Lysara's skin shifted when Jake entered a room, the way Jake's attention tracked to wherever she was working. Crisis arrived when environmental systems threatened to compromise life support. Jake and Lysara worked desperately to implement repairs, functioning in perfect synchronization, his practical instincts complementing her scientific precision. When they stabilized the systems with minutes to spare, adrenaline still coursing, Jake found himself saying without thought, "You're incredible, absolutely brilliant. I'm constantly amazed by how your mind works." Lysara, exhausted and emotionally raw, responded with equal honesty. "You are infuriating, impulsive, frequently inappropriate, and somehow exactly the person I want beside me in crisis situations." They stared at each other in flickering emergency lighting, both realizing they'd crossed another boundary. "Blue Smurf," Jake said quietly, the nickname now carrying affection. Lysara's skin deepened to that beautiful rich blue. "I still maintain that comparison is inappropriate." "Yeah, but you're blushing again." "I am not," Lysara began, then stopped. "This is highly irregular. Interspecies relationships are complicated, often impractical, fraught with cultural misunderstanding." Absolutely, terrible idea all around. There would be significant challenges. Completely inadvisable. Neither moved away. "You called me Blue Smurf," Lysara said finally. "I slapped you hard enough to cause minor cranial trauma. This is not how functional relationships typically begin." "True, but we've never been particularly good at following typical patterns." Lysara reached out and gently touched Jake's cheek, the same one she'd slapped. "I am sorry about the force of that slap. I'm sorry about the thoughtless comment that prompted it. though I'm not sorry about where we've ended up. Nor am I, she smiled, genuine, warm, transforming her composed features. My impossible, inappropriate Blue Smurf referencing human. My brilliant, occasionally violent Velaryn scientist. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his, a Velaryn gesture of intimacy and trust. We will need to establish clear communication protocols, address cultural differences systematically. Absolutely. We'll be very professional about this completely inadvisable emotional entanglement. Her skin was the deepest, richest blue Jake had ever seen. Months later, as the Harmony's mission concluded, Lysara presented Jake with a gift, a small holographic display showing a cartoon Smurf in crystalline Velaryn technology. I had this created to commemorate the beginning of our unconventional relationship, the inappropriate comment that started everything. Jake laughed. This is possibly the most thoughtful and simultaneously ridiculous gift I've ever received. It matches our relationship, thoughtful and simultaneously ridiculous. Blue Smurf, Jake said affectionately. Lysara sighed but smiled. I have accepted that you will never stop using that designation. Never, though I promise to only use it in private contexts now. Some boundaries learned. You remain fundamentally boundary-challenged, but you are my boundary-challenged human, and I find I prefer you exactly as you are. They stood together looking at the stars, two beings from different worlds who found connection through misunderstanding, humor, and willingness to communicate across every divide. Love, it turns out, can bloom in the space between worlds, beginning sometimes with thoughtless comments, surprising blushes, and slaps hard enough to see stars.